All right, thank you. Welcome everyone to today's Ask Microsoft Anything AMA on Endpoint Privilege Management in the Intune Suite. My name is Joe Lurie. I've been with some of you since this morning's Windows updates, and then we had iOS. Now we're talking about Endpoint Privilege Management, and after this we have Linux and Android management. For those of you that were with me in the last one, you know that I lost my internet in my house during that stream, and so I'm using my phone to go through. So if I don't get to say goodbye to you because I lose it again, well, it's nice talking to you all. I am here today to talk about Endpoint Privilege Management and Intune Suite, and I'm here with my good friend Danny and Matt. Danny, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do at Microsoft, who you are, what you do, and then we'll go to Matt, and then we'll start answering questions. Danny, you might be muted.
All right, there you go. I think I figured that out after a few years. Yeah, Danny Giller, Senior Product Manager. I've been at Microsoft for 10 years. Been with Configuration Manager and Intune since they were born. So I'm an old config man here. Yeah, done everything in the config man device management space, a little bit in the security space. Right now, I focus on a lot of Intune stuff. So advanced app management, Win32, and inventory. That's kind of my spaces today.
Cool. Matt?
Yeah, hello. My name is Matt Call, and I am responsible for a lot of Windows security stuff, including endpoint privilege management. And yeah, I've been here longer than Danny. I'm not going to brag about it, but I have been. And my internet's faster than Joe's. So, Joe, I really hope we don't run out your data plan on this AMA. So I'm super excited.
Everybody's internet's faster than Joe right now.
I'm pretty sure that is true.
I think they wanted me to do a demo to start. Is that okay, Joe?
Yes. Yeah, it's okay with me. Sure.
Yeah, great. And then I think right after that, we got some questions for Danny already pouring in the queue. He's way more interested.
Can you give us context? What's this demo on?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So, you know, with us working on, so first off, this is going to be an endpoint privilege management demo. With us continuing to work on our support approved scenario for endpoint privilege management, and already having a feature in market that's going to be impacted when we introduce support approved, I want to take a few minutes to talk about that feature so you can understand how it works with EPM and how you should think about it. Once we release support approved. So the feature I'm going to talk about is a feature in EPM known as default elevation response. Some of you might see this. It's in the elevation management settings or elevation client settings profile in EPM. And the role of this setting in EPM is to tell the EPM components that run on the client side what it should do if an end user specifically asks for an application to be elevated, but no rule exists. We deal with a lot of confusion in this setting for some reason. Some folks think that it does different things, but I just want to remove some of the ambiguity here. So when you configure this setting, you have a few different options today. You have deny all requests, which means that if no rule exists, then EPM will just throw a sorry, you can't do this pane. Then we have require user confirmation, which means if there's no rule that exists, the user will still be able to elevate anyway. And in the future, we're going to add support approved to this. It'll actually become the default value. So when we add support approved, effectively what that will mean is if an end user tries to elevate a binary or whatever, and a rule doesn't exist or you haven't created a rule, they'll be thrown through the app, or I shouldn't say app, I should say the support approved scenario where, you know, we've talked about this externally quite a bit, but support could approve a one-off request for an end user. Important settings here. You know, if you set this to user confirmed or you set it to support approved, you'll have two options that you'll require from your users. This looks just like a user confirmed rule. So this should be relatively familiar to all of you if you've used EPM. You can specify the requirement for business justification or the requirement for Windows auth, right? So I'm just going to show you how it works. I mean, the experience works very similar to user confirmed. I'm going to go right here to my Windows 365 device that's running EPM. And I've downloaded 7-zip because all serious IT professionals probably use 7-zip. And I have no rule deployed for 7-zip. So when I right click here, you'll notice a few different things. You'll notice first that we've moved Run with Elevated Access up to the top menu in Windows 11, which was a top ask that shipped with the June release of Intune. And I can just right click and hit Run with Elevated Access on this app. You'll notice that I get my end user experience just like I would for user confirmed, because that rule that we had prior showed me that those two options were selected for default. I'll go ahead and enter a justification like, hey, I need this. You know, end users always give super useful justifications. And then I've launched the secure desktop to actually provide my password. It's important to note that you can use any authentication mechanism with EPM that can be used with Windows. This is just a cloud PC. I haven't set up any external auth factors. I don't have my FIDO key plugged in, so it's asking me for a password. Once I hit OK, what will end up happening here is after a second, EPM will launch 7-zip as an administrator, and then you can go ahead and complete the install. So that's just the default elevation response behavior. I threw a couple Easter eggs in there for you. Those of you who can spot them, congratulations. And that's how it works, and that's how you can think about it as you move forward with support approved. So yeah, that's it. That is starting my demo. Hopefully we got some more questions. And then I'll pass it back to Joe. Joe, go ahead, man.
And I'm actually gonna, I had one question I'll queued up for Danny, but while we're talking about EPM, we did get a question from Andrew. And do we have any plans on bringing EPM to Mac devices?
Yeah, great question. We have aspirations to make EPM cross-platform, and that, of course, includes Mac OS. We don't have any timelines to commit at this time, but we are. It's top of mind for us. We know that enterprises use more than just Windows. We know that when you think about a EPM solution, you can't only have a solution for Windows and then a different solution for Mac OS and maybe something different for Linux. We plan on expanding platform support as soon as it's feasible. But Mac OS is substantially different to Windows, so there's some effort there that we need to put in to make that work.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for that question, Andrew. All right, so the question I was going to ask Danny is from Craig, and I get this a lot from my customers. I got this a lot when I was at Midwest Management Summit in Minneapolis a couple of months ago. What benefits does Advanced App Management within the Intune Suite provide over native integration between Intune, the new Microsoft Store? You know, Intune has Win32, LOB, Store App New, and now we'll have Advanced App Management. What's the benefit of using Advanced App Management?
So I would say the first benefit, I had to make sure it's not on mute. So I'd say the first benefit would be this should be, I would say, beginning of you not having to wrap applications anymore. Immediate benefit, I think that's the first thing I would say. We have aspirations to add a lot more or iterate the feature quite a bit. So you can look at some of the things we're looking at doing with actually updating applications. We've been talking to lots of customers, like pretty dauntingly, about updating applications, automatic updating versus guided update. So in the beginning, right, your first value should see, oh crap, I don't have to package application anymore. There's a catalog, select the app, and boom, it shows up in the tenant. You know, there'll be some, well, I want this, or I need this, and that's all fine. Like, we plan to fully iterate that capability to provide more and more value as the feature matures. So we're kind of starting at ground roots, building the foundation. And the excitement really is you don't have to wrap applications anymore. I'll go off on a branch and say this should be the beginning of the end of having to wrap applications. So that's kind of that's what I would say brings the immediate advantage. Again, more advantages to come as we iterate the product. Mm-hmm. If anybody's seen any of my talks, maybe even the MS Secure, described in detail, you know, other things we're looking at doing, adding updates, maybe even automating updates, and then filling some of the other gaps in the app model that could actually be inherited by Advanced App Management. So lots of value from beginning to end, and customers will see value to their actual estate at different points, and that's fine.
Cool. Thanks for that. There are a few different ways to deploy applications, Win32 apps specifically. And so I love this, that we have this catalog and we'll be able to deploy them. And again, as you said, a fast follow to update them and whatnot.
Yep.
So we have another, just a kind of a follow-up question that came through. If Advanced App Management is likely to contain an expanded list of apps compared to those currently available in Microsoft Store. So we know if I go to Store App New, I get the whole availability of whatever apps are in the Microsoft Store to be able to download, with some caveats. Can't have an age rating and whatnot. But, is the app catalog likely to contain an expanded list of apps compared to those currently available in the store? If it doesn't, I don't really see the benefit of it. Is Microsoft concerned that this might be counterproductive and slow down adoption of the new store app by vendors, as customers will no longer need to pressure software vendors to ask them to host their apps in a more widely available Microsoft Store? It's a long follow-up there. I hope you got all that.
No, I got it all. It's a good question. It's a good, I would say, concern. Like, hey, Microsoft, where are you in it? We're kind of in on both, right? We own the store, we own the catalog. The catalog is directly integrated and controlled by Intune. So if I was a customer, the lens I would put on it would be maybe there's opportunity for both. The catalog, I think, and maybe I'm a little biased because I own the feature, the catalog is going to be pretty robust. Like, we'll have a lot of applications there. I can't really speak for how the store acquires their apps or anything, but I do know that there are apps that have gotten rid of, or ISVs that have gotten rid of their old XZs, I guess, and just decided to rely on the store. So, both is kind of an answer. I am being a little biased saying I think I'll wind up in the end, long term, having more in the Windows app catalog. And again, like, you get all of the customizations. I'm trying not to go into my IT pro realms here, but there's so many things when it comes to those apps that you may or may want to do, pre-post actions or user notifications, things like that. I'm not aware of the capability of the store, so full disclosure, but some of that stuff may not be available in the store, and at least our roadmap with the Windows app catalog, I'll be making that available to you at some iteration, whether it be pre-post actions or notifications, because there's things that are going on across multiple different streams, whether it be Win32 all up or for Advanced App Management. And then you take into account some of the security signals that we talked about bringing into Advanced App Management during the MS Secure session. Like, that, I think, would be if I was back being an IT director, like, that would be where I put my chips. And it doesn't mean I wouldn't use a store. It just means that the store may have a purpose as well as the Windows app catalog may have a purpose.
Yep. I was going to say the same thing. I don't think it has to be one or the other. One thing I love about the app catalog is that when we import these apps into Intune, we don't have to worry about, what is that install command? What is that uninstall command? Those are already pre-populated for you. You can edit them, but they're pre-populated for you. The correct as far as they come right from the vendor. So we assume that they're correct. Another benefit there.
I don't like, I could go on and on, but there's a lot of stuff, advantages. Again, like I said, some of the advantages will be seen earlier by some customers. Some of them will be seen later. Like, where you get excited will depend on where you are, what your requirements are in your organization. But from the beginning, I'll say I am very excited for what we'll be able to do for all customers, whether you see value in the beginning or at the end or in the middle. I'm pretty positive everybody will see some value and be excited.
Yep, it is exciting where we're going with that. Switching gears, going back to Endpoint Privilege Management, Matt, Jesse's asking, and maybe we didn't do a good enough job with this, but Jesse's asking, when is EPM going to be GA or generally available?
Yeah, sure. EPM is GA right now. So think about our strategy here for deploying EPM for a second. I'll share some behind the curtains sort of information. EPM is a pretty complex project, pretty complex product in general. Our strategy for releasing EPM is that we're going to basically do iterative release of these different pillars or different pieces of EPM. So the first two pieces of EPM, user confirmed and automatic elevation scenarios, those went GA in April. And then we have our final sort of foundational scenario, support approved, That'll be coming later this year. That will start in preview, and then we'll go to GA right afterwards. The other sort of pillar of EPM in reporting. Reporting is in preview right now. We're probably going to GA that in the next month or two after we add some additional reports that we're working on right now. So yeah, GA is EPM as a product is GA. There's one feature that's still in preview, which is reporting. We'll GA that, and then we'll add the preview feature for support approved later this year. So that's all good. I will remind everyone that the Intune team supports preview features in the same capacity we support GA features. So, we're developing quickly on EPM. So get it on a few devices in your environment if you're interested in using it. Give us feedback on what you need. We know that we have some work to do to make sure that we have the full feature set everybody needs, because this is a mature space that we're entering. And we're releasing stuff quickly to make sure that we can meet people's expectations. So it's really easy for us to add more functionality on a monthly basis with Intune shipping, and we're really excited to get feedback. For those of you that are testing it out right now, we have hundreds of customers at this point across tens of thousands and almost hundreds of thousands of devices. We thank you. Your feedback's heard, and I think over the next quarter or so, you're going to see a lot of the features you've been asking for come to fruition. So thanks for all the feedback thus far. If you're not giving us feedback, try it out, get it running, and let us know what you think and where we need to spend some time to win your business.
Yep, and we can put that link back up again, aka.ms. Intune feedback is a great place to go to give us that feedback. We're always listening to that. I do want to mention that in your demo, Matt, you mentioned that you had a couple of Easter eggs. Our friend Rudy did type in the comment what one of those Easter eggs was, and that's that you mentioned right out. I'm using EPM on my Windows 365 virtual machine. Talk about that Easter egg a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we've wanted to do for a long time. We've been working with the Windows 365 team to make sure that we do it the right way, and we do it in a way that lives in their ecosystem. It makes sure EPM works properly. Right now, we are in private preview with Windows 365. We plan on releasing it very shortly for the whole world to use, so that way you can use it with it. Yep, it's really important to us as a business. And we're excited to finally get that out the door and make everybody happy.
And for those of you that want to know how to join any private preview here at Microsoft or with Intune, you can join a customer connection program, aka.ms. Join CCP, and our production crew will be getting it. There we go. Join CCP to get into any private previews or to be considered for private previews. All right, so we're gonna. I'm going to ask both of you this question because Christopher is asking about platforms. Will all these features work on Windows 10 and on Windows 11? And because Christopher didn't specify Advanced App Management or EPM, I'm going to ask you both. So Matt, with EPM, will this work on Windows 10 and Windows 11?
Yeah, if you read our docs, and my really good friend Heather is going to put up a link on the screen right now. So there we go. If you read the docs, you'll see we do support Windows 10. We do have the requirement to be at a certain patch level of Windows 10, and that has to do with the way that we communicate with Intune. That is essentially the March Patch Tuesday release for Windows 10, 20 have 2, and later. So we support 20 have 2, 21 have 2, 22 have 2 on Windows 10. Then the same platform, the same on Windows 11. There is some customer confusion sometimes around like, hey, I just built this Windows 10 device and EPM isn't showing up or EPM isn't working. The reason why is you got to update that device. Windows 10 21 have 2 media, doesn't have the March update streamlined into it. And the Windows Update team is very cognizant about affecting productivity and reboots after you first build a device. So update those devices as soon as you build them. And EPM will come right down and you'll be in really good shape. But yeah, go ahead, Danny.
And Danny, Advanced App Management, that works on Windows 10 as well as Windows 11?
Yeah, it'll work on both. We didn't put any artificial blockers in. Right now, I don't know if there's any specific build version of Windows 10. I don't see why there would be. So we're actually actively testing right now, hopefully going into private preview in a few weeks. Outside of that, yeah, it should work on Windows 10 and Windows 11.
Cool. All right, we have a question from David. I'm going to Azure Virtual Desktop now. Will there be an integration, and I'm going to try to clarify what I think David's asking. Will there be an integration between Advanced App Management and Azure Virtual Desktop? Any improvements for app management in AVD is a huge plus. So I think first the question is there going to be maybe the AVD, an updated remote desktop app in Azure in the app catalog, or if we enroll an AVD device in Intune, will Advanced App Management still be able to deploy apps more efficiently than AVD can do today?
Yeah, it's funny when I hear these questions because I always wonder, what did we do to stop it? We didn't do anything to stop it. Like, it should absolutely work. I actually just took a note that I need to add that to our test plan, but we did not put any artificial blocks in for a lot of things because what we wanted to do was build off what we already had. So the way I would really answer your question is, does Win32 apps work today? So if you added an Intune Win app, does it work? Because in the end, Advanced App Management will make you an Intune Win app, right? Windows 32 apps. So if your Win32 apps work today, they should absolutely work in the AVD platform.
All right, cool. And for those of you that may not know, you can, when you start, you can filter for AVD specific when you start deploying apps. So it's something to keep in mind as well during your testing, and you want to test on AVD and on physical devices. So a question, Matt, Nigel's asking for kind of a follow-up on your demo. With the default behavior that you just demoed today in EPM, does the user still have to provide an admin level account for the specific device? I assume it just hands off to local UAC or user account control or admin groups.
Yeah, we don't operate inside of the OS layer, so there's no admin group required, that sort of stuff. The default behavior that you just saw works the same way that a rule does, right? Like when you specify a rule for an app and you send it to a standard user, they're allowed to elevate that app, because you sent that rule down. The difference between that rule behavior and the default behavior is what happens when no rule exists, but an end user explicitly asks to elevate something, right? So they explicitly go, hey, this installer, I want to run it with elevated access, right? So when they specify that, if no rule matches, then it falls back to that default behavior. And that default behavior can be deny, which is what it is by default today. So if you've never configured that setting, EPM will just say, sorry, no can do, you're not allowed to do that. But we've heard from some customers that it's easy as they start to move to standard user to sort of ease their end users into it. So what they'll do is they'll remove admin privileges and then they'll set the default behavior to user confirmed, so they can start to gather sort of that telemetry about what's being elevated, right? And they can see that. You don't need to do that, but you can. And then over time, they remove or they set that default behavior to deny. That the default behavior becomes really important when we release support approved, because we'll almost have like a pseudo block scenario. What I mean by that is with support approved, you'd be able to say, hey, I want these apps that come from either this location or signed by this vendor or do whatever, right? I want these apps to require support approval. And then you could deploy a default rule as allow everything else to just elevate. That way, if you have like a developer scenario or somewhere where you need to give people more, broad access, you can do more of a block list sort of approach on what can elevate versus needing to go through and create an allow list for every app. So it's just about giving you some flexibility, putting another tool in the toolbox, and understanding what that option does. Because I've seen folks who configure that and they think that that's the rule that applies to all apps, and it's really just a default rule or a catch-all sort of behavior for end users that are running EPM. So yeah, hopefully that answers the question.
And I think the important part you did answer from Nigel's question is, does the user still need to have admin level rights? And they don't have to. Our goal is to make sure the users are standard users, not admin level users on their devices.
Yeah, all the EPM scenarios count on the user being a standard user. Like we want them running a standard user, and then we're just selectively elevating whatever you allow to run as admin for a period of time, right? So,
yep. We got a question from Russell on testing and trialing the suite. Can EPM or the Intune Suite, which also includes Advanced App Management, can EPM and the Intune Suite be used on a subset of PCs while we learn? We can't license everyone at this time. How would you suggest that they do that on a trial basis?
Yeah, so I think by default trials include like 250 licenses. I think that's what let's just assume that it's a number. I can tell you it's a number. I don't know exactly what that number is.
250.
As you might imagine, Uncle Satya pays my bills, right? So like I don't know what the trial is, but there's a trial. It's not going to be for your entire environment, right? We're not going to give 100,000 trial licenses or whatever. You can add the trial, and at least for EPM, actually, I think for remote help and all of them, you can assign those licenses to a subset of users or whatever, and then just use the functionality that's included in the suite on that subset of users or devices. So yeah, you can definitely do that. No worries on that at all.
Yeah, and you can sign up for that trial right inside the Intune Admin Center. Just go into Tenant Administration, Intune Add-ons, and sign up for a trial right in that node. Thanks, Matt.
Now, I will add one more thing. A disclaimer. Whenever you're dealing with licensing, you should talk to your account team always about what you can do, what you should do, whatever. Microsoft licensing agreements can be complex, and it's important to know what you can or can't do when you add or remove stuff from your account. So, if you want to trial, EPM, or you want to trial Intune Suite or anything that requires an additional license, like Joe said, we have the avenues to do it right through the portal to make it easy for those customers that can do that. If you don't have that access, or you don't have the right privileges to do that inside of the portal, you should feel empowered to just ask your Microsoft account team. They've been empowered to make sure that you can trial the Intune Suite and give feedback. So if you have any issues with that, you can find us on Twitter, reach out to account team, anybody with a Microsoft badge, and just tell them about your experience, and we'll get it corrected for you.
Yeah, thank you for putting Matt's Twitter there instead of like all of ours with that.
Yeah. My Twitter handle is Lori. Yeah, _ Microsoft. That's exactly it. Yeah. So you can go ahead and find me. Yeah, you can find me there.
All right, we got a question from Vaughn, and typically I jump to answer all the store questions, but I'm going to hand this over to Danny today. But Vaughn is asking, is it possible to block the Microsoft Store app? It's like a Wild West out there, but retain full functionality of the company portal.
That's actually a good question. Old config head man, Danny. Yes, there's a way you could get the binary, deploy it through config man, and block the other things. It's a good question. I don't know the answer to can you get it.
So I'm going to ask a different question, because the Store app is not the company portal. They're completely different. So blocking one shouldn't impact the other at all. So I think I'm going to need, Vaughn, a follow-up just to have a little bit of clarity. When we deploy apps in Intune, we can block the Store app. You can even deploy the Store app new apps while blocking the Store app from the desktop. That's not a problem. And we have CSPs and we have group policies to block the Store app. So my clarity question is, what kind of functionality are you losing in company portal today that you're attributing to the Store app being blocked? I think is my question for you.
That's a good question.
So I think if we get that, we can help answer help answer your question.
Yeah.
Going back to that AVD question, Danny, to further explain, we don't currently manage AVD with Intune. We need to use Azure VMs and or a script which installs a winget, installs via winget, and all apps get updated monthly. It was really meaning, is the advanced app repository something that can be accessed without necessarily enrolling AVD VMs into Intune? So I think the way I would first kind of approach this is, in order to use the advanced app management catalog, does the device need to be enrolled in Intune?
Yes.
Yes.
It needs to be, because the advanced app management catalog is a part of the Intune Suite. So if you want to use the advanced app management catalog, then you need to be managed by Intune so that you can take advantage of it.
How about, and this is just me asking, how about for co-managed devices?
So co-managed devices, they're enrolled in Intune. So as long as you can go into Intune, add an app, right, and see the Windows app catalog, you're good to go. Because remember, that's where everything starts, right? When it comes to apps and the management of devices, that's where it starts. So if you're, with no blockers were put in. So if you're managed by Intune or SCCM, you can go add an app and deploy that app to your Azure AD group. Devices in the group should get the app.
Cool.
I tried to make it simple. It's already complicated enough for us internally.
Right,
Danny, you need the client apps workload in co-managed devices, right?
Oh man, so there's some things to unpack there, but yeah, you can, if you put the slider, I think it was in the middle, you can take advantage of both. If you take the slider all the way to the right, I think you just get the Intune.
I think all the way to the right still gives you both. We can verify.
You probably are still going to get both if you move it all the way to the right.
Client apps is the low-hanging fruit co-management one. Move it all the way. Move it all the way over.
We purposely did, and I want to say because of the apps workload specifically. That's the only workload that does work like that, though.
Yep. All right. So Matt, Wolfgang's asking about when we enroll into EPM. What's the purpose of the somehow second device enrollment with EPM besides Intune? I can see a second MDM cert or a second enrollment in the registry.
Yeah, sure. Great question. Rudy's watching. He's probably laughing right now. So that enrollment sets up a secondary channel to Intune for communication. We have a bunch of secondary channels for communication to Intune. The difference between this one and maybe others that we use for things like the Intune management extension and others is that there's components that do the communication. For EPM, the OS is setting up an additional channel because, as you may know, for MDM, we use built-in OS components to talk to our Intune gateways, right? So for EPM, we had some requirements that didn't allow us to use the primary gateway that we use for Intune. And so we use this secondary channel that the Windows client team provides and that we use to communicate with our infrastructure. I can get into detail in probably an NDA conversation of why we use that different channel. But the short answer is that we had some requirements that couldn't be fulfilled by the main channel. So we decided to use this secondary channel, and it's working great. We see virtually no issues with it. There's always some issues in terms of, firewall and communication and that sort of stuff. But for the most part, just based on our telemetry, based on customer feedback we've gotten, it seems to be working pretty well. So if you have more questions about that, I'm happy to answer them, but it's probably deeper than what I want to do here.
Yep, for sure. All right, thanks, Matt. We have a question from Mohammed on EPM, and this is I hear this all the time, even internally from some of our specialists. I hear from my own customers. Once elevated access is provided through EPM, what happens if a child process is spawned? Do we have to request access for that elevated access for the child process as well?
Yeah, sure. Great question. So the default behavior in Windows is for children to inherit the token of their parent. So today with EPM, as we chat right now, by default, it'll inherit the admin token. So if you launch an admin process and it creates children, those will be admin children, right? They'll run with high integrity, right? Now, in the future, the very short future, we're going to release some controls in EPM. This is a highly sought after feature to allow you to control child process management, right? Or to control child process elevation. So you'll essentially be put into control when you create rules like, do I want this to always spawn elevated children? Do I want it to only spawn elevated children if it matches a rule, right? If the child matches a rule, or do I want to always spawn standard user children, right? So we'll be putting you firmly in control of that. It's not something that we've talked about a lot publicly yet, but we've been very vocal about needing to run that, and we're making really good progress. And we're excited to ship that feature soon.
I think I'm going to expand on that also. I'm going to ask, I have a lot of conversations where customers have asked me, can I just elevate PowerShell or can I elevate command prompt? And what happens at that point? Can they, and I think this is kind of where Mohammed is also going is if I launch an elevated command prompt, can I just start typing whatever I want? And basically have full admin rights inside the command prompt. What's our recommendation there?
Recommendation is to not allow your end users to elevate command prompt or PowerShell or VB or WScript or C script or anything, right? Like, those processes are really hard to control. So the enhancements that we have coming, they're gonna add some controls around those things, but you should think long and hard about the processes that you allow to elevate, and make sure that you know that when you specify an app is allowed to elevate, whether it's command prompt, whatever, you're specifying that you trust that app and that user using that app to do the right thing, right? So it's definitely better than full admin, like having full admin on a device. But the more rules that you add to a device, the lower the security benefit, right? The biggest thing I can tell you is when you create rules, you should give just enough access to those people who need it. We've run into a few scenarios or a few customers, not even using our EPM tool, but using others, where they would do things like, create, if Joe needed a rule for command prompt, this is a really bad example. Joe would never need this, but let's just say this. Joe needed a rule for command prompt. They would create the rule for command prompt, but they deploy it to all their users, right? And that's not something you want to do, right? Like you just opened up the attack surface for all of your end users. So moving to standard user is a lot more than just enabling an EPM solution, whether it's us or somebody else, and then thinking that, then removing admin rights. You have to put some thought into the process and policy behind what you're going to allow on your endpoints and what you're going to enforce. It's super, super important. So we'll help enable your policy, but we can't write your policy for you, right? Like you have to, as an organization, you have to sort of have those insights or sort of that policy engine into your organization on like how things are going to work, what level of risk you're going to assume. And don't get me wrong, any level of change from full admin is positive, right? It's just, how positive, right? You want to be as secure as possible. So yeah,
Yep.
That's my answer.
Cool. Thanks. Danny, I'm going to bring this question from Jeff over to you, even though it starts off sounding like it's going to be a Matt Call question, but I think it's a Danny Guillory question. Admin elevation on requests for apps is super cool, and maybe this is the wrong QA, but are there any plans to enable some kind of app installation approval workflow similar to what we have in Configuration Manager? And Danny, you're muted.
All right, that better? Man.
Better.
Yeah, so it is an ask that customers have asked us for. It is on the plate. I can't tell you when we will get to it. It's been asked quite a bit, even before I came into the role. So it's on the backlog, something we just haven't gotten to really peel the onion back on. If I was being very transparent, I'll say there's probably a few things that we need to go solve first that would just put a sore spot if you had that approval flow today. I think there are some things that need to be done before we can even go and tackle that. So fill some gaps, then we probably can tackle that much more realistically and valuable for you as an end user.
If I were a betting man, I would say that we've already received that feedback in our Intune feedback channel. And so all you need to do is go to Intune feedback and just thumbs up, like that feedback.
Yeah.
And get that back to us.
Yeah, it's definitely something we've heard before. Now, how it intertwines with EPM, that could be very interesting. Matt, for comment.
Why it would require EPM? I'm sorry, I got distracted by a question coming from Rudy. So we can blame Rudy. But yeah, go ahead.
No, how the flow could interact with EPM. That could be interesting.
Like in Configuration Manager, we have an approval workflow for apps, which we don't today have in Intune. But if we do build that into Intune, what would be the impact on EPM, or how would EPM also integrate with that?
Yeah, EPM space is really unmanaged applications or compatibility scenarios. The EPM space isn't necessarily to govern or to facilitate managed app installations. However, there are scenarios where we may be able to use telemetry in the future. By telemetry, I mean the elevation insights. Like, say, for example, you were elevating an installer through our support approved flow, and you had 5,000 users that did it in the span of 6 months. We might be able to build some integrations in the future where, EPM says, hey, Danny has this in the catalog, like you should just deploy this, and then you can stop like doing these one-off elevations and like lower your support cost. So for us, the Intune Suite is all about reducing the cost of what you need to operate. And when Intune starts sort of getting into all these sort of adjacent spaces of where we've traditionally been, whether that's advanced app management, or that's our scenarios around remote help, or that's scenarios around EPM, or all the ones that we're building in the future. That's really where we can build additional value is building these integrations that really make your jobs easier. And that's sort of the goal of the Intune Suite. So, yeah.
Cool. All right, we got a question that came from Twitter, and I actually had the same question yesterday from one of my customers. Can I create EPM policy directly from a report? If I am not auditing, but if I looking at EPM reports, can I create a policy directly from that report?
Today, there is not an easy button. Tomorrow, there will be an easy button. Yes.
Okay, tomorrow, June 23rd?
No, at some point in the future. This is just like some other scenarios that you may look at and you might go, man, this seems so easy. Like, why can't they just do it? There's more to it. The biggest thing to it is the certificate payload. Like, we want to promote the ability to create rules based on signature. We believe signatures are really valuable in the trust space. I mean, I guess the entire public key infrastructure world would probably agree with us. So, there's a limitation right now that's stopping us from doing that around getting these full certificate files from devices in order to use those in policy. But we're working through that. And as soon as we can get the full metadata there, we'll enable that. Actually, the button is sort of already coded. It's just not in production yet. So like we have a little bit of work to do around file metadata before we can allow you to just click a button and either create a new policy or add that event, that application elevation to an existing policy, right? So yeah, we want to get there. We will. It's a big piece of feedback we get pretty frequently. We want it to be easy for you guys.
You had mentioned earlier that for EPM to work on Windows 10, it requires probably Windows 10 version 28.2 with the March 2023 update. What's in that? Why the March 2023 update? That's not me being curious. That's a question that came in.
Yeah, I know who asked that question, and I see you, person who asked this question. Long story short, in building EPM, we had to ask the Windows team to make some fixes to the MDM stack, the Windows communication protocol that we communicate, that the Windows client uses to communicate with Intune. Those fixes are included in the March 2023 update. Actually, some of them are included before, but this is pretty standard at Microsoft. When we build new features, and especially features that have dependencies like the OS platform, we're going to find things that maybe don't work exactly the way that we want, or same thing like when we get support cases and we have to fix things in cumulative updates, right? We want to make sure that there's a simple button for you to use, so you don't have to figure out, hey, do I have this patch, that patch, all these prereqs. So in this case, it's the simple button is the Windows March 2023 update. And all of that's on the Intune docs, which Heather will put back on the screen right now probably, which is aka.ms Intune EPM docs. And the version that you need and all of that stuff is right there.
And just to expand on what you said, the March 2023 update, it's cumulative. All of our cumulative updates, just by definition, include all the updates came before. So whether that fix to make that work on Windows 10 came in March or before March, at least getting March, we'll get all those updates.
Yeah, that stands for latest cumulative update. Aria could correct me. She'll be on Twitter in 5 minutes correcting me if I'm wrong. But yes, I believe that's what it stands for. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. All right. So Jimmy's asking a question, Danny, about I think paid apps would be the best way to word it, or licensed apps. What's the process for applications that require licensing outside of Microsoft, like Autodesk, SolidWorks, or even Adobe, right? So what about those apps that require some kind of a license? Are those going to be in the app catalog, advanced app management, or what's the process for those?
So apps that have a license, but a trial experience will be in there. So one of the examples I use is I do a lot of videos, obviously. So Camtasia is a paid license app. Would that be something in the catalog? Absolutely. Why? Because it's a publicly downloadable URL that will give you a trial experience for X amount of days. So as you go through our early experience, you'll see paid and unpaid apps in there. If the application has a solid install, we'll show that to you. You can change and add a key or don't add a key. What will really change is that first run experience. So, if it's a trial, then there'll be a first run experience for the end user. Pop up to put a key, pop up to add feedback. Do they like the app? Things like that. If it's if you get to the command line and you want to change it and put the key in, then you can put the key in and have a different end user experience. So, So apps that are paid will be in the catalog. Apps that are unpaid that will be in the catalog. Specifically, what will not be in the catalog will be apps locked behind some type of paywall or login. We cannot actually host those type of applications. So if an application is paywall or locked behind a login, those type of applications will not make the catalog.
All right,
hopefully
cool.
that's clear enough.
Yep, very clear. And I can't believe we only have a couple minutes left, but I can't believe that this question is just coming in. Will EPM support things other than .exe? Will it support other file types?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, yeah, like here's the deal. There's only like 3 executable formats in Windows, I think. The difference is that file types like MSI or whatever, those are what we call handled file types. So what that means is Windows will launch, like it'll say, hey, Joe's favorite game.msi. I know that I need to launch MSI/I Joe's favorite game.msi, right? So you can do that with EPM today. The problem is that you have to create a rule for MSI exec. And as you might imagine, that's a huge hole. So we don't want you to have to do that. So the team is currently working on handled file support, and we're hoping to release it pretty quickly. So, you could specify your rule to target a specific file, right? That's handled by Windows. And you, in theory, targeting that file that's handled by Windows would, do the same thing as targeting the executable. This is a classic example of how we had to basically choose what we were going to do first, know what we were going to do next, and know what we're going to do in the future, right? And we knew that we'd have to start with EXE support because that's basically the foundation of almost all execution in Windows, either that or library, right? And we knew we'd have to introduce handled file support later. So the team's actively working on it. We really want to get there. Yeah, you'll see it from us soon, I think.
Cool. Thanks. And final thoughts. I'm going to go Danny and then Matt. Any final thoughts? We have about a minute and 10 seconds.
Go use Intune Suite.
Matt?
Yeah, I just want you to know we really appreciate it. And, the feedback, you guys spending time to tune in and listen to us go on about, things you have questions on. And we really appreciate the questions coming in. And, make sure that you're noisy and you give us the feedback early, often, and let us know when you think we're doing the wrong thing. It's really great when you let us know we do something right. So much of the time, maybe you don't express that, or maybe I don't do it. I know I'm only noisy when I'm angry, but I can tell you it goes a long way when our devs see little tweets that say this feature really works great, or hey, I just tried this and it's really awesome. Because everything from these awesome features you see to really small detail things like the EPM being on the top level of the Windows 11 start menu are super important. There's people behind it, and we really appreciate the feedback, good, bad, or indifferent. So just keep it coming.
Thanks, Danny. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, everyone behind the scenes. Thanks, everyone answering questions. And of course, thank you all for asking questions. It's been great being with you for the last 3 hours. Unfortunately for you, Max Stein and Lothar and Courtney are coming up next to talk about Linux and Android management. I'll be behind the scenes. You don't have to look at me anymore after this. But thank you for joining us all day, and have a great rest of the afternoon. And Danny, Matt, thanks for joining us today.